Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 22 of the podcast. A new year of the podcast. Somehow we did not get canceled in 2020. Like, basically, what the hell is that? Everything else got canceled in 2020. Life, the ability to go outdoors, the ability to shop anywhere, PS5s, snow at Christmas got canceled, everything fun. But we survived till 2021, and we are here to start our run discussing the collaboration between Tony Scott and Denzel Washington. Zack is here being very creepy with a toy. And more importantly, we have Cody Newberry.
Yeah, I had a contract problem, couldn't show up till 2021. It was just this whole mess, but we got it cleared out. We're fine.
Are you saying that your suspension was similar to Alex Cora's and now you're able to return to work?
That's it, yeah. With more salary. It's kind of weird how that all works, but yeah.
It's funny, you hit a trash can enough times and then they catch you and somehow you make more money out of the process. He didn't have to work through COVID season. What a genius, I'll tell you. And the world's greatest hero. Zack has no idea what we're talking about.
You were suspended for 60 games. 60 games. Great.
60 games, and he did not have to endanger himself, so it's kind of the best of both worlds.
I agree.
But thank you, Zack. But we are here, and let's continue on to our favorite intro segment, which is, of course, the last movie on Letterboxd. Mr. Zack Ford, your last movie on Letterboxd.
First of all, since you didn't give me a time to talk about myself, I needed to tell you the best joke. This is not a hippopotamus; it's a hiccupotamus. Because it hiccups. And there's a book with it. I was reading it, and I was hiccuping, and my son Theo, not to be confused with my other sons, was like, I think he was trying to hiccup, or he was having a severe asthmatic attack. This whole book, and I was a little concerned. But like the whole time, he's going, and my son made need to go to the doctor because this hippopotamus has ton of bad habits. Okay, anyways, my last movie that I saw. By the way, I want an animated version of the hippopotamus story, and I fully support this. It's real good, and I want to look it up. So last movie that I saw is Meet Me in St. Louis. I ruined my whole thing. I wanted to sing it. Meet Me in St. Louis. They literally sing that for like the first half hour of the movie, and I forgot. And my wife is like, "That's why you sing that song, because it's the only one they sing in the movie." So I watched it with my wife, who's not really into classical movies, but she also told me she doesn't count music schools as classics, which seems like some weird exception rules that you sign up for yourself there. So she enjoyed it. It's like, Wizard of Oz is a bit of Oz, but this is like prime Judy Garland, especially really getting to use her voice as a focal point. And this is where, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas comes from. And no one has sang it better than her. And that scene is powerful, not just for the vocal reasons, but also it's the emotional crux of the movie, involving some knocking down of snowmen. But what's really nice about Meet Me in St. Louis and why I love it is because, like, sometimes you just don't need conflict. Sometimes it could just be like a family hanging out in St. Louis throughout the seasons, and the primary conflict be that they have to move. It's just a real relaxing, calming movie. Plus, like a 25-minute Halloween sequence. It's like batshit crazy. So you get calm craziness, and then like 8-year-olds putting themselves in railroad tracks and accusing people of violence, like burning fucking wagons. And I that's the Halloween I'm gonna make my son celebrate. Is not trick or treating, but like fucking up the town, like those kids did.
Wow, there's a lot of statements in there, including you claimed that Judy Garland has the best version of that song. We all know it's Michael Bublé, and we just need to accept it.
You're not allowed to have musical opinions, and we have decided this before.
I agree with Lucas.
Frank Sinatra also, he's not bad.
He changed the lyrics. I found this out a trivia thing. He changed the lyrics because they were too sad, and he had to make them upbeat. It's a little sad, fake Sinatra.
Cody, have you seen Meet Me in St. Louis?
So, besides all the Red Sox gear, I live in Missouri, so I've seen Meet Me in St. Louis, but it's been a long time since I've seen Meet Me in St. Louis. Yeah, I couldn't when she starts saying stuff about the movie, it like recycles back, and I've seen it, but it's probably been like 10 or even longer since I've seen the movie. I remember liking it, but again, that was a long time ago. So it's big in St. Louis. Well, a lot of people love Meet Me in St. Louis. It's one of their favorite musicals. So, which I don't know why. I'm totally confused why it's their favorite, but we're a lot of egomaniacs in this state. So,
well, my top 100 is literally just movies made in Massachusetts, so I understand the.
That's fair. Don't blame me.
I think I'm in the same boat with you. I've definitely seen it, but it has also been a very long time. So I remember like a couple dancing sequences and a song, but beyond that, not much about the larger plot. Cody, what is the last movie you watched?
So yeah, I've been on a race for 600. So basically, the movie that I picked because I saw a lot this day, I just picked Spotlight, Best Picture winner from that year. And I was always in the camp that I don't think it should have won Best Picture. My favorite movie from that year was Room, but now watching it, I can safely say I think that Spotlight deserved Best Picture that year. I think Spotlight is phenomenal. I always put in the camp after that season of it's hard to watch. It's not a fun subject matter. I don't really want to go back and rewatch something about priests, molesting children. It's not a, fun time. But the performances in this movie are insane. Like just look at across the board with everybody playing it, and I'm kind of like it's kind of like a court case, kind of like breaks down like trying an investigation of all the stuff, and just to see how much starts piling up as the movie goes on. And Mark Ruffalo pretty much loses his mind like near the end, which makes perfect sense. I think the movie is incredible. I honestly do. I think I don't know, maybe in 2015, 2016, I wasn't that big of a fan of it, but now like I think it's really great.
Yeah, this was definitely my favorite of that Oscar class. I think it's in my top 2 to 3 of that year. I loved it from the first time I watched it. It's actually, I'm surprised you didn't like it. I mean, it makes total sense you liked it now because this is like a classic Cody movie. Great cast of character actors, kind of courtroom investigation-esque feel, really kind of good dialogue, but not like just talky scenes, dialogue into action and discovery. Yeah, I'm also one of the people.
Go ahead. I just think the issue is like the Oscars always burns movies for me because like I live in a town that doesn't get all of them, so I rapid fire a lot of them when I get when they come available. I watch them all at once, so I don't really like spend enough time like while it's on to the next one. Coho thinks The Martian's the best from that year, which is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But yeah,
I think The Martian though. It's
The Martian's good. The Martian's good, but better than Spotlight. I just have I'm confused. I'm confused. But
Mark Ruffalo should have won an Oscar.
I agree with that.
Mark Ruffalo should have won an Oscar.
Famously, that's the year that everyone's like, "Oh, Stallone should have won the Oscar over Rylance for Best Supporting," and I'm always the guy who's been like, "No, Ruffalo should have won the Oscar."
Ruffalo should have won the Oscar
for Best Supporting. That's one of my favorite performances that year.
I don't know if he's even my favorite in Spotlight. There's
interesting.
There's Key. I like Keenan a lot, but no, mine should have won, which had no chance. It's Rachel McAdams. It's her best performance. She's real great at it. Her hair's not quite as good as theirs in the game, but no, I think it's. I just like watching people good at their jobs, and I think everyone's really good job. But I think Rachel McAdams, especially, just like how seriously she takes the procedural aspects of it. Just the competency that she exhibits in that movie, I find impressive and important to that movie working. So it's rude for me to make hair jokes about an actress in the movie. I regret every word that I said, because she's really good for a lot of other reasons. And I'm a horrible male. And I'm checking my privilege. Anyway, Spotlight was my number one movie of the year. I find it like insanely rewatchable, even though there's the procedural. I think just because of the procedural aspects of that newspaper environment is really rewatchable. Like I've seen All the President's Men a handful of times, and I adore this movie for the same reasons. Just once, like I said, watching people be good at their jobs is something that is really not comforting, but that I want in my life often.
I think the thing when I thought that, and now watching it again, it's a super rewatchable movie. Like I could watch that movie again. I also think like how corrupt, no offense to the city of Boston, basically everybody was at that time. That even the people, newspapers, like shut it down, like move on. 9/11 happened. We're focusing on that. That story goes, and hoping that it just dies in the basement, like it died when it first tried to surface. So it's kind of crazy, like how like. And it opened the eyes of so many like people into that world that were pretty much the Catholic Church in Boston at that point was pretty much close to the mafia. Like they had ties and everybody was hush hush. So I think it's a super rewatchable movie now. I'm glad I revisited before the end of the year.
Well, there's a famous scene in the movie. They're like, well, who are the people going to believe you were the church? Everyone in town goes to church. The Catholic Church has that power. And in some ways, what the power of the movie is it not only exposed the problem in Boston, but also just the problem generally in the entire world. This was like the first big time it popped off. And then it was, and it was like, oh, wow, this is not just a Boston problem. This is not just a U.S. problem. This is an entire world reckoning that is still going on to this day. And actually, you know what? Zack is right. Rachel McAdams should have won Best Supporting Actress because this is the freaking Danish Girl year. And I think Alicia Vikander is terrible in that movie.
I think she's good at it. She's also, that's Carrie Fraud. She's the lead of that movie.
Yeah. Give Rachel
McAdams. I agree. I think Ruffalo and McAdams should have both.
Give them awards. Yeah, absolutely. And take away Inarritu to the Revenant and give it to McCarthy. All right.
Yeah. Let's stop saying best director means like the most ambitious. It's not how it works.
Yeah. All right. So the last movie I watched in Letterboxd was a rewatch of the Paul Greengrass thriller, The Bourne Ultimatum, which is the conclusion of the original Bourne trilogy. They come back for sort of a spin-off later, and then sadly they tried to make Jason Bourne, which is to this day one of the most disappointing theater experiences of my life. But The Bourne Ultimatum is awesome. It is such a good thriller. Damon is so good as this character. They've spent 2 movies before it really letting Damon's character grow. This is something I don't feel like you don't see in a lot of action movies, is character growth across like an arc, an actual true character arc a lot of times it's just like you do a trilogy of action movies and it's like, let's just bring the same character back and deal with a different problem each time. And I feel like Damon really gets to go from a guy who has no idea who he is to starting realizing some things to realizing, oh, he's part of this program, and then just the continuation on into Ultimatum. I love the sequence in the train station in London with Paddy Considine. That's one of my favorite action sequences of the 2000s when Damon is, I love like the intelligence of Bourne where he's like understands how security cameras work. So he's like, if you walk on this line, they won't be able to pick you up. If you walk 15 steps this direction and then you turn right and you walk 10, like just the really technical aspects of how trained he is. I feel like a lot of times you get action stars like this and it's just like, let's watch them do some crazy shooting and like beat some people up. But I feel like the intelligence of Bourne is what sets him apart and is what makes him such an engaging and interesting character. I love all 3 of the movies, but Ultimatum is definitely the best one.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I like the other 2, but the Bourne Ultimatum I think is incredible. I still remember the scene. Where is he at? He's driven off the roof. What? And like the whole car goes off. Like it's one of those. I'm with you. I probably haven't seen it since 2016, like when Jason Bourne the movie came out, and how they sold us on a trailer with a punch, and thought we were all going to be hooked in. I think just this one is like has everything from like the first 2 like perfected in this one. The action, the where that character is, basically the spy intrigue of where it's basically he has to decide one or the other. Ultimatum, it makes sense. But no, I think the movie is absolutely incredible. I think it's one of the best action movies out there. It's so that series is so rewatchable if you stop at this one and just don't watch anymore. Don't watch the other two.
I actually like Legacy. I will defend Legacy.
Yeah.
I think it is fun as a spin-off, although poor Renner is the ultimate guy who's always trying to be the lead in an action movie and just is never ever going to be. It's like, oh, you can be the supporting character in the Avengers, and you can be the supporting character in Mission Impossible, and you can be the supporting character in the Bourne movies.
He
just
could have been in Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise just decided no. He could have been set up. It's not his fault.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, I haven't seen any of the Bourne movies. I was intrigued by you saying on Letterboxd about the European police siren sounding cool. It's like, okay, maybe I'll watch that. I want to listen to European police sirens. But I'd say here's the flaw. And now I know Cody has been watching movies by a year like I have, and the flaw with that system is that it's hard to watch franchises because if I do the year that Bourne Ultimatum comes out, I'm like, I'm gonna skip it because I haven't seen the first two, and so I can't do any of them until I just happen to get the Bourne Identity year. It's a struggle, but maybe one time I'll pull the Band-Aid and I'll watch at least the first three. I probably won't watch the last two.
Yeah, okay. Or you could just watch movies and not follow this rigid system.
Hey, I thought about changing my whole system. Yeah, it's fine.
It's just
I got that somebody who's watched 110 comedies from the 21st century.
Rewatched 110 comedies.
It's like me. I was doing 2013 before midnight was there. I couldn't technically watch at that point because it was like I love no fucking clue what's going on. So yeah, that is a struggle. I agree with Zach, but it's the best way to watch movies. I will swear by.
I do think, Cody, you said one thing that really struck me was Ultimatum really builds on the previous ones, and especially one thing I noticed this time watching the entire trilogy ending in Ultimatum was it really builds on Greengrass's action style from Supremacy. It doesn't always work in Supremacy. There's a couple of those action sequences in Supremacy where it is really hard to tell, even with a shaky cam, what's going on. And I think he does a really good job cleaning that up for Ultimatum and making those scenes really easy to understand, even if he's using the same style he's always used.
Yeah, that's why I think it's a fan. I think it's probably, if I think about action spy, it's in the top 20 for me, or top 10 where it would be, because I like those first two movies so much, but they're flawed in both directions. So that's why they never would even come close. But he cleans everything up and polishes it to the way it's supposed to be, and makes the movie makes Ultimatum the best one out of them by far, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Let us continue on to the main discussion today, which is, of course, another sort of action movie, I guess you could call it, even though there's not a lot of physical fighting. But that is, of course, the first Denzel Washington and Tony Scott collaboration, which is Crimson Tide. Zack Ford is here, which means it's plot summary time with Zack Ford.
It's going to be a fucking disaster. Ready for this.
All right, we're going to jump in and we'll help you out if you need it.
So Denzel's at a birthday party for his kid, which honestly is almost more stressful than anything that happens on the submarine. This is kids shouted. I had this on my original outline and decided 1 minute of kids acting crazy was important enough to talk about. But yeah, so you already know this guy can be calm under pressure because he can deal with 36-year-olds yelling at a magician at one time. He gets called. He watches on TV. Shit's happening in Russia. We're just gonna call it that. Shit's happening in Russia. It's just, there's a rebellion. Some crazy guy. Okay, so he gets called in and hired by Gene Hackman to be the second in charge. That's his official military title. Second in charge. Second submarine boatman under Gene Hackman. So then they go off on the Alabama. I know it's because you're a dumbass Auburn joke that you were saying before. And so they take off. There's a lot of conflicts happening between Gene Hackman style and Denzel style. Denzel's he's a studied man. He went to an Ivy League school, never actually fought in battle. Harvard. Gene Hackman earned his in the grind of being in battle. is more experienced, kind of like the blue collar captain versus the white collar educated captain that Denzel's supposed to be. So there's a lot of conflicts that happen between that. There is a message that comes in and that says that, hey, we're gonna let off the nuclear bombs. Time to get party started. And so they get all set up for that, but when they're down low, they receive another message when they don't have time to receive it. And then I was like, maybe we shouldn't blow up other fucking countries until like we are sure this is what they want us to do. And Gene Hackman's like, nope, we already got the message. It doesn't matter what the other one says. Mutiny's happening. Gene Hackman gets locked in a room. Then Denzel gets locked in a room. Everybody's like, what are we supposed to do here? Chaos is happening. There's a lot of staring at each other really intensely. Like verbal form of like finger pointing, but they never actually point their finger at each other while yelling, which I think Gene Hackman should have brought out. They're like, listen to me. But they have that tone in their voice. Turns out the message said, hey, let's not blow up shit. The guy gave up. See, what's the word? He threw the white flag. Surrendered. Thank you. He surrendered. And so they decide, you know what? Denzel made the right choice. They go to tribunal. They say, hey, you're both fuckheads, and you both did a shitty job on the submarine keeping cool under pressure. But at least like you prevented World War III from happening. And then they just like move forward.
All right. That was a plot summary.
Yep. It's exactly word for word as it says on Wikipedia.
Yeah. I just wish all of military communication was written the way Zack Ford was written.
I understand why Gene Hackman and Denzel would be confused on which one they're going.
Hey,
time to blow up shit.
All right. Time to blow up shit. Mr. Newberry, this is the movie you selected. What is your relation to this movie? Why do you love this movie as much as you do? Let's give you the first shot at Crimson Tide.
So what draws me to this movie is a man named Denzel Washington, if I'm being honest. But I really enjoy Tony Scott's films. Like they're not all great, but they're fun. So that's why it draws me in on there. And I'm a big fan of Hackman too. And once I'm looking through his filmography, and I watched this movie like probably when I was 18 the first time, but when you see Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington in a movie in a submarine, that's all you had to say. I was in. It's such a tension-filled movie, and it's in the sweet spot of movies. If you're 90 minutes to 120 minutes, you're the golden, like, that's a movie that I'm fully on board with right there. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't do this stupid, like, tell me the backstory of Gene Hackman, like, why him growing up and why he hates people and why he's angry. I don't care. Just put me in the submarine and let's just go. And that's why I think I go back to this movie. And I just think, I think it's the best submarine movie too, like out there. I think it's a kind of a part of war that we don't really get to see ever. But the tension that has to build, like in that small of a space, that if you get hit by anything at that point, the entire thing, you're done. Like it takes one hit from any direction, and that the tension that has when those torpedoes are flying in, like that has to just. It's insane to me. So I find the character work between them great, but the tension still over rewatches still holds up, I think.
Absolutely. And this is kind of the hallmarks of Tony Scott, which is fast-paced action, consistently really good actors. He gets really good actors to be in his movies that and help in some ways elevate what could really be a very basic people are having a fight on a submarine about orders, and because you have Hackman and Washington steps it up. And also he clearly loves technical jargon. He loves when people talk about it in a way that the audience doesn't need to understand what they're saying, but the audience understands, but by the way that they're saying it, that they understand how to run a highly complex machine like a submarine. There's all the scenes where it's like, oh, she's calling to this person and this person and this person and checking this and checking that, and it's just like that competency. Yeah, they're just like, oh, you have to verify these codes. Are these actually the correct messages? Are they fake? All this, it's wonderful stuff, and I think in some ways the military chain of command it's very fitting for a Tony Scott movie because he likes to explore the complexity of like what happens if this highly complex system that needs to function where the second in command is in line with the first in command and everyone's agreeing with each other. What happens when that breaks down? And that is in some ways the entire crux of the movie is what happens if people don't agree.
Yeah, it's generally a like theological battle. That's the conflict at stance. It is two men, disagreeing, which seems like a small stakes thing, but they attach the highest of possible stakes to just a man-on-man disagreement. That's like their verbal battle and who should be in charge of who you follow. Also, like the whole world relies on it. Otherwise, you're going to blow up Russia and the marbles will fall, or dominoes. Marbles don't fall. The dominoes will fall. Guys, it's been a long time since we recorded a podcast. The dominoes will fall, and they could evolve into World War III. And so I think just that tension of possible nuclear war is always present, and they let you know, just like through the sweat in their faces, that you can see the stress of that possibility that always hangs over on these characters' minds and every decision they make, but also the tension that just naturally comes with the tight space of being in a submarine. So those two aspects, because imagine having that threat of war over, but also like not being able to escape anybody at all times. You're just constantly around these people that you're disagreeing with in the smallest possible space. So dealing with the biggest threat in the smallest space seems like the most stressful environment you could put these two characters in, which makes us, lie on their every word. We're so engaged with every thing that comes out of their mouth in arguments because there's so much that hangs on every decision, every word they make.
And I even think like, if I'm jumping ahead, please tell me. But it's with like Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington from the moment that they meet each other. They don't say a whole lot to each other, but you can just tell in their body language that these two just don't trust each other. And the whole thing, the whole crux of the entire movie is basically Hackman. If I'm wrong, we lose people. Like, if we don't do this order, we're wrong. And Denzel, if we do this and we're wrong, we're losing people too. But they have the same idea in the same, but they don't. It's meaning two different ways. So the entire battle of I have to do this to make the right call to save the people that we need to, and then if you're fucking wrong, we're going to lose a lot more by reading the instruction wrong. So you see that tension build from when they first meet to each other, and without saying, they're saying stuff that's nice and just friendly banter back and forth, but you can feel the tension between both of them, that either one of them don't feel 100% safe with either one, and it plays out perfectly.
It's an old school versus new school state of mind where Gene Hackman is very much like, we are in the military, we follow orders, we do what we are said, and there's zero gray area. And right. As a more intellectually trained Denzel Washington, he understands more complexities that may be involved in these decisions and maybe don't do exactly as we have been trained based on that the exceptions exist.
There's also just there's obviously huge stakes for what happens with the mission. But they do some really clever work to set up the differences between the two men. Both from they don't specifically say it during the movie, but there is a hint that there's a political difference between these two men. Denzel is from the North. He's highly educated. He's Harvard educated. He is versus, the Southern Gene Hackman. There's clearly a difference between them in the upbringing, in the place they grew up, in the level of education. And also, the movie doesn't ever explicitly touch on this, but Denzel is a black officer, the second in command to an older white officer on a ship where he's one of very few people of color. And so even when he takes command of the ship initially, he is in the right in terms of military command. But what you see very quickly is he gets turned on by a lot of career professionals, probably in some part because they know Hackman better. But I think there's also just a lot of there. It's easier for the men who turn on Denzel to understand Hackman than it is to understand him. In some ways, he is completely alone on that ship in terms of his type of philosophy. In the intellectual, we need to check and double check and triple check everything. While Hackman's a little bit more gung ho.
Well, there's that moment where the new cadet or whatever is shown up on the screen. He's a big guy, and they're like throwing insults basically at him, like, you ain't gonna make it, you're gonna die, blah blah blah. And he ends up being one of the casualties. But that's the first step. So like the first step that happens because Hackman does like a training thing without him there, and he's down in the break working on something else, and that causes a death. And Hackman basically saying, "Are you blaming me for it?" And he's like, "No, it was a casualty of the situation, but no, I don't blame you." But like trying to draw it out, like, are you gonna? Where's this line gonna be? Like, so yeah, they don't touch on it, but you can definitely tell it's some racially motivated a little bit in one way or another in that situation.
Well, it's impossible to look at a situation where an older white guy is kind of ripping into a younger black guy and not see at least some race implied in that interaction. Like, I don't know if Tony Scott sat there when he was writing this movie and working on it and was like, I'm going to put this in there. But I think in some ways, maybe it's easier to not see back then. But I think in the 2020 context, it is basically impossible to watch this movie and look at a situation like that and not see some racially motivated action there. And even just like,
yeah,
he rips into him in a way that it feels like he wouldn't do with a white officer in the same situation. There does seem to be a little bit like putting in him in his place from Gene Hackman to start the movie. He wants to make sure it's really clear, I'm the boss and you're not.
It's definitely not in the script. It's more subtext that is created naturally because of who they casted. I think they know what they're dealing with when they get Denzel, that they add that new layer, that new subtext, but it's definitely not inherent to the movie I think they wanted to make. It just got added on, and I think in a lot more interesting way. And I do think the way Gene Hackman is, drawing out his character in this more old-fashioned, older man kind of grumpy style plays into that contrast of you just can see this guy not being so trusting and accepting of a person of a different race being his next in control, that it adds he's still professional and to some level or extent of what you're doing with your job, but I think he still also plays off the power dynamics that as the white man, the history of power, he uses that to his play. I want to quickly touch upon the because since Cody brought it up, the testing scene, and because it also ties to something that you mentioned earlier, Lucas, why I think that scene is so important. Other than really helping develop that relationship between the two, it creates what becomes a repetition of those events. It's a practice to what we see in real later on of them having to go to emergency things. And I think that's what makes the jargon work. I assume that's going to be comparing a lot to Greyhound during this as another, boat war movie we talked about on this episode. And that the jargon made no sense throughout the whole movie. And I had never had any idea what they're talking about. And I think the difference is part of the repetition of these events of running. It's almost practicing it with us, running us through it so we can understand the sequence of events, what is happening, we can understand the terms, we see them, in play. So when the tension is hiked up a bit, we do understand a little bit of what they have to do to get through this process. So it makes us a little patient during that process as well, because it's kind of long, get to wait for checking out the codings and all these things, but we know what to expect when we get there. Which it kind of educates the viewer as they go on.
Jargon means nothing unless we see it being ordered and then we see the reaction to it. You talked about Greyhound for a second. That movie is all he's just blathering on jargon and we never see the actions related to it. In this movie, there's a very clear, I, as the commanding officer, will say something and then we will watch the officer who works in that area respond and deal with it. It'll be oh, check the radar, and you watch the person check the radar and then call back to the captain. You are right. They really do. They teach you this is the the cause and effect of the use of the jargon by the officers.
But yeah, but that is just Tony Scott to a flippin' T with over like there's a movie. It's not that great. It's called The Fan. The Fan. It's with Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes. But there is so much baseball terminology thrown in that movie that if you don't know baseball right away, it gets you lost. But Tony does a really good job of breaking down the baseball conversation so you're not lost in. But he wants to stay true to what a fan of baseball would be talking about instead of saying the generic stuff he talks about in the more technical terms. So that's why, when the whole testing thing goes on, you see that where they're reading off all the alphabet, like in the alpha, echo, blah, 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 and you're going through and you're like, they're breaking the keys, I concur, like back and forth. You're like, wow, there's a lot of but it makes perfect sense when Denzel shows up and the real threat actually happens. Plus, I'm really glad this movie was made when it was and not now, because I think it would just go into different places. Like we'd be in Washington D.C. with somebody else trying to send like another message, or why are they not communicating? It would have been a drawn out mess where Tony just kept it confined to the ship and the people involved in the conflict itself.
Well, it's like the great thing about it is because it's locked in this one location, you get to let that tension just slowly increase and increase and increase, and there's no way to stop it. There's nobody who can call in and tell them to stop it. There's nobody who can overrule them. Like there's no one thing that works so well about the time that they're sitting in this movie is there is no higher authority. No one from Naval High Command is going to call in and say, no, you listen to me. No one is calling in to do that. So like when Denzel takes control of the ship, he's in control of the ship. There's nobody who's going to come in there and mediate this decision, this argument between them. They just have to act and hope that everybody follows, the rules. And then very quickly you see what happens while a bunch of people don't follow the rules because they don't like Denzel. And it just kind of falls apart really, really quickly. And you just turn up into this, it becomes really chaotic really quickly. But it's also kind of fun because you get the chaos inside the ship. But at the same time, they also have to they're having like an infight inside the ship over the command. At the same time, like they're getting shot at outside. It's this like ridiculous situation where you're like fighting over who gets to control the ship. At the same time, you're trying not to get destroyed or the ship to like sink. Like, the ship is sinking at one point. It's like they're still fighting over it, and it's interesting how there is no way for the tension to stop because they can't go to the surface and get the call. They can't. There's no way to end the tension because of the enclosed space they're in.
Yeah, Hackman seals off like part of the thing with people like involved in it, and you're just like, what the fuck? Because Hackman takes back over control of the ship, and it's flooding, and he's like, seal it, and we're like, there's people, doesn't fucking matter, just seal it. I mean, he'll hold a gun to someone's head at some point. Like the man just loses his ever loving mind. The problem is, and it sends him over the edge because they have those slight disagreements at the beginning of the film. Like they're like, I don't know about this, blah blah. And then Hackman is like, gets the order, starts talking to it, and then the line that makes me laugh because Hackman gets so fucking frustrated. Like, shut the fuck up! Just leave me. Like this is my ship. You're not going to tell me. But then Denzel being so versed in naval law and basically what rules what, and he goes, no, I'm not going to, and now you're going to be put in under arrest, basically. And no one disagrees with him because they clearly know the rule of law better than Gene Hackman at that point. So, and then, yeah, the tension in this movie is one of the best parts of this film.
I think Gene Hackman sets it up, though. Like, he tries to test Denzel early on because he wants to beat him down a little bit, so he just becomes his parrot, the guy who just goes along with whatever Gene Hackman does.
Basically just shows that, hey, this is my ship, and learn.
Right, loyalty.
I want to see how loyal you are to me. And
exactly. He wants Denzel. He wants Denzel to just go, I concur to every single order he does. And I think with a lot of people, and I think what makes Denzel so perfect is he's the character that he knows what is right. He knows what is the rules, and he's sticking with that, even though this guy has tried to pick on him and test him and push him and like try to get him to just play ball. Mm-hmm. And so Hackman really doesn't know how to deal with that because I think he's a classic like old school military guy who's just so used to his second in command just being the guy who goes, "Yep, boss," over and over again. So like I think he has no idea how to deal with Denzel saying, "No, that's not the rules," and then Denzel saying, "No, I don't concur," not agreeing with him, being what Hackman considers to be insubordinate, but also being right in the eyes of the chain of command and the rule of law. And I think that's what really sets Hackman off and why he's like breaking out of cabins and holding guns to people's head and acting like a crazy person for like the end of this movie is because he has no idea how to deal with somebody who won't go along with him, but is also technically right in the eyes of naval high command. I think he has no idea how to deal with a person like that.
Well, Hackman has a rationalization of all his concepts of what power should look like. That's how he kind of teaches it to Denzel. But like, oh, you're like, I want you to, you tell me when I'm wrong. Just don't do it in front of people, which is, we see as code as like, tell me in private so I can shut you down, and not in public where other people might, want to take your side and it causes issues, because really it's only like my word that matters. Because there's a number of his lessons of his, like moral rationales that he, contradicts as soon as he has the chance to, because it really was only, he was putting it in place just a way for him to keep his power. Because as soon as he'll question Denzel's, power and his things in front of everybody any chance he can, he just doesn't want anyone doing it, to him. And it is that kind of old school, he like dictatorship concept of power. To think he does say lines like, "We're fighting for democracy, but this is not democracy," or something like that. We're fighting for it, not practicing it at this moment. And that was that concept of he would put whatever rules into place just to keep Denzel under his thumb, but he'll break what he needs to keep his own power.
Well, that, and Zack touched on it earlier too. It said that he comes from the older military mindset of just do what you're asked to do and move on, while Denzel comes from the newer side of just because somebody tells me something, you still need to question it, because there's people at stake, and what if we're wrong, and that's the battle between both of them the entire movie. So he tests him at the beginning with the whole testing thing to see if he's going to break. He finds out real quick that Denzel is just not on board with any of his plans.
I want to go, knowing that Gene Hackman, everything you said was bullshit. They let off right at the beginning, because the sunset scene is kind of brilliant, because he's like, I like you, Denzel. That's the character's name. I like you, Denzel, because you know how to just appreciate a sunset and not, talk the whole time while Gene Hackman's not shutting the fuck it up and watching the sunset himself. So he's immediately like contradicting everything he says he values at that exact moment.
Facts.
Yeah, I
really
mean,
what he will say is, only I should talk. I just don't want to hear your voice.
Denzel doesn't really ever play second fiddle to anyone in his movies. So even as the second in command, you knew he was going to end up being the star of this film.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. He'll share the screen half and half, but he will never play second to most.
He'll share the screen, but his foot will always be in front of yours.
Like even in Glory, he's a supporting actor, but he still shines brighter than majority of the people in that movie.
Yeah, I want to touch on. So I think this movie is great. There's one part of the movie that leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, which is the end. I find the tribunal scene really well acted. I love having Jason Robards be the guy. I think that's a great casting choice. It's like the classic, like 70s actor, all the presence. He's like the perfect dude to be in that role. I do find the response from the military to be somewhat infuriating in that the idea that they had both screwed up. I think if you watch this movie and you get to the end, it is very clear that Denzel followed protocol and the chain of command, and Gene Hackman acted like a jackass and like pulled a gun on people and threatened to kill people, and probably should have been court-martialed if we're being completely honest.
Definitely.
If you want to know why it's a half a star, it's not 5. It's 4.5 on mine. It's the entire ending of this movie.
It's the same thing.
You can't look at me in the face and tell me you made a mistake and you made a mistake, but both of you, let's move on. That's not how fuck. If I was Denzel, I'm like, whoa. I snuck out of the thing that I was in rightful command. I was put into imprisoned against any protocol and any. They took over the ship. They held a gun to a guy's head and said he was going to shoot his brains out. Threatened another guy to give him the codes to launch a nuclear code that he did not have the orders to. And Denzel broke out and said, "Hey, this is now mine again." They're not the same.
No.
It seems like such a tacked on end where I would have been better of Gene Hackman. I'd rather a scene of Gene Hackman telling Denzel that like he basically, you're gonna hear blah blah something like that, and then Gene Hackman goes down for the stuff. If you're going to do a tribunal scene, if you're going to do an actual like scene about that, Hackman needs to pay for it, and Denzel needs to get off like scot free. Like,
it's two smaller details. It's like they don't even let Denzel testify. Which, if I'm Denzel, and then if they don't let me testify, and then they tell us that we're both equally wrong, I throw like I'm saying something in that moment. That's ridiculous. And then the part that gets me worse in the tribunal is walking outside, and then Gene Hackman starts making small talk. I'm like, at that moment, Denzel should tell him to go fuck himself. I thought like you would full psycho. You got removed from your position because you were breaking the rules, and then you just did a freaking mutiny, and now you want to like have small talk about a horse. That ending is just, I just find it very weird, and it's the one part of it that doesn't really work for me.
I'm going to go all defense on this. So one thing is we already, through the development of Gene Hackman's character, creates an idea of what old school military mindset all can be, which carries through in the tribunal, and what a lot of these guys are probably really old school to get into that position on that there is firm rules, and Denzel having starting a mutiny essentially is already just putting in the chaos and breaking the rules at that point. So that is punishable to their mindset. That is a line that should not be crossed, let alone all the shit Gene Hackman has done as well. I do think it's a problem that Gene Hackman didn't have any punishment. There should have been, he should have just been let off the hook. It was like too far. As far as I'm saying, they're both in the wrong. I kind of see that. I think you two have too much trust in the justice system of our country to make completely moral and ethical calls, rather than it'll be based on the old-fashioned mindset of rules and how things are done that don't make sense in all situations or in the modern times. I had other thoughts that I have completely.
I think it makes sense that Jason Robards is not as harsh on Hackman as I think the audience would like him to be. I do think that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I do think it's a little bit less makes sense that Hackman would try to make small talk, and then Denzel would just kind of like let it happen in front of him.
But here's the thing. So, Denzel did not get in trouble. You're like the kid saying Denzel should be pissed. Like if he got told to be quiet in class. There's kids who tell him be quiet. Like, why am I in trouble? It's like, are you in trouble? Like, there's no consequences. Like, chill out.
No.
He was saying, like, Denzel, you didn't do everything perfect, but there's no consequences. So why is there a reason for him to fight? He didn't need to testify because they already knew they were just going to let him off. They fucking promoted him. They rewarded him in this instance.
You know who needed to testify? Viggo Mortensen. They got a gun put to the back of his head and be like, listen, how did this man handle it? Not very well. He's trying to kill me.
To be fair, Viggo Mortensen
testify against Gene Hackman makes sense.
Viggo Mortensen also, let's be real, shitty friend. Don't pull a mutiny against your friend sort of pull a mutiny and kind of let it happen. He doesn't actively participate. He does give them a bunch of guns, which is essentially the same thing.
That was the real contract, or like the middle ground of like, do you follow orders or stand up? And he was just kind of stuck in the middle, to where like everything was just a delayed reaction. He was the one who didn't really have the intelligence to like battle through it, but just enough morals to like fight with it. But
yeah, that's a whole situation real rough with like that's the whole part of just that, because it gets to that tension-filled point where he threatens to shoot him. He's like, whatever, and he's like, well, how about him? I'll shoot him. He's got family or whatever. Just like this dude's going effing psycho. Just what he wants to fucking blow up Russia real bad, like in the worst way possible. He hates Russia.
He's very gun happy. He's very trigger happy in that moment.
Plus, the one thing they have, like the whole cast of characters around it, the side characters, are just fun characters. Like, just they're either so meanest of mean, and like you see just different people. Like, I can't think of the actor's name, but like Tony Soprano is what's his name?
James Gandolfini. Yeah.
James Gandolfini. He's in there. Like Viggo Mortensen's in there. Like the cast that he has in this movie is kind of crazy for like. And I think you put in the note or whatever. They're all character actors basically that you just. Yeah, they play perfectly in this tight. They add the tension too. Like each one of them has like sweating profusely while they're reading out their codes and stuff. Like they add the tension just as much as Hackman and Denzel.
If we're going to talk about the great character actors, we can't forget the great Fabrizio. Fabrizio, he fell off the boat, the big boat. He hits like a fucking pipe off the big boat, and he has a hard death. So I'm glad he got some vengeance in Crimson Tide to kind of be a hero as far as, standing his moral ground and helping out Denzel and waiting for that message and getting the message safely on time for the world to be saved. Because Fabrizio, he lived a hard Italian life and died rough in that big boat.
I love George Dzunza, who's the boat. He's the guy who tells Hackman that he's not that he's by the book. He's the by the book guy, and he just has this perfect military look. He's like this big dude. He has like thick neck, thick shoulders. He's got the buzz cut. He's got like that perfect classic like I've been in the military since I was like 19 years old look. Like that's like the only thing he knows, and he's just like
my dad's been training me since I was 7. He used to waterboard me in the backyard to get me ready.
I don't smile. I have no facial expressions. And even after it, he's like, I follow by the book, and he's like, I don't like you to Denzel. It's just like a perfect like classic like I follow the orders. I don't have to like you though.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Anyone have any final thoughts on Crimson Tide?
It's on Prime, and more people need to check it out. I think
really do.
I think it's a really it's their first their first collaboration, right? I think that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's a great kickoff between Denzel and Tony Scott. So yeah, I think everybody should just check it out because it's not that long. It's again tension filled throughout the entire movie. I don't see if you like any of like the war type situations or just like two great characters playing back and forth with each other, I think this movie's definitely an easy watch to get through, especially.
Absolutely. Zack?
Yeah, I'm amazed how much I love this movie. I feel like on paper it's just not a Zack movie. It's hard for me to do war movies. This is like action through dialogue. You were wondering whether it was an action movie beforehand. It really like isn't, but it seems like it by the way the dialogue hits off each other and fights on each other and creates that conflict. It's pretty impressive, and I just find it how impressive. You said it's kind of a Tony Scott thing, but how impressive that like every action and moment just really matters to the character development, to the theme, to the setting. Like every second, even I always got to remark on my nickname. Even the dumb like Jack Kirby Silver Surfer like argument, has a reason because it shows Denzel,
which is famously the Quentin Tarantino rewrite on Crimson Tide. Was
it's the dumbest part, but it does show Denzel's chemistry with the other sailors on board compared to Gene Hackman, who's like once in a while I'm tired rather than trying to calm down the stress a little bit like Denzel wants to. So even that silly moment, every moment has intense purpose to evolving these characters in this extreme environment.
Absolutely. It has like the pacing of an action movie, but kind of like the dialogue and tension of a courtroom drama, or like it has like a moral debate about what you do in a tough circumstance. And I think the combination of just great actors and the single environment and the tension that's built throughout it, and just like the technical aspects of how complicated a sub is, and how like you can take a bunch of people like the three of us who have no idea how to run a submarine, and you feel like you understand the actions that are Zack knows
Speak
how
for
to run.
yourself, asshole.
I concur.
Cody has one in the backyard.
Yeah.
But you just very quickly you just kind of understand how the inner workings of a submarine, like what's involved, what's needed, and I think that's the brilliance of Tony Scott is he takes really complicated technical tasks and he makes them understandable to a wide audience, and that's like probably his biggest skill. And this is a really good example of I would like to thank Cody for being here. This was fantastic. We will have you back another day when we have another episode that you feel a passion for in the same way you do with Crimson Tide and your one true love, Denzel Washington.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's not happening. We're doing plane movies.
I feel like if we did Pirates of the Caribbean and you came on, a certain man from Minnesota would kill you.
Gosh, wouldn't that be great? Just me there for his favorite one. Oh, good so much.
This is gonna be our new approach in 2021. Is we're gonna get the people who don't fit just to piss off others.
That is our poll that we put up for December.
We're not supposed to say until the end of the month, and I ruined it. And Lucas is mad at me.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We did a poll in December, and our fans picked plane movies as our February topic. Currently in the process of figuring out the movies to do for that. Next week we'll be back. We will continue Denzel Washington and Tony Scott, where we talk about Man on Fire, probably maybe one of the most controversial ones in their run together. It'll be interesting. It is a very long movie, but I think interesting. Please watch it, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.